Hello there, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I am Thurston Hillman. I will be your moderator for this panel, Adventuring During the Drift Crisis. I am the senior digital developer here at Paizo, which means I'm responsible for a lot of strange and esoteric product lines that, we'll talk a little bit about later in this panel. But before that, I want to pass it on and let my fellow panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to go in the order of which I have my panelists listed on my helpful support document here. Haha, I came prepared. That's a first.
Oh boy.
First up, we have Jason Keeley. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Hi, as she said, I'm Jason Keeley. I'm the Starfinder development manager, and I have had my hand in a great number of Starfinder Adventure Path volumes, and indeed even written a module or two. Well, a module and then an adventure, but you know.
Excellent, excellent. All right, next up, Soul.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sol St. John. I'm an editor at Paizo. I'm specifically the editing lead on the Drift Crisis hardcover, the first Driftcasters AP, and I'm also the editing lead on the Starfinder side of OP, so I've looked at all of the outlines at the very least for the tie-ins for those sides, so yeah.
Awesome, awesome. And finally, Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Catalan. I am the Starfinder Society developer. So I'm in charge of all of our Starfinder Society scenarios and our Starfinder bounties as well.
Aha, see? Look at that. Look at that. We got a whole team here, everybody. You may be wondering, are these people qualified to talk about the Drift Crisis adventures? Well, luckily we are. They didn't just, pick us because we're all very pretty people. No, we are here to talk about adventuring during the Drift Crisis, which, if you were here for our previous panel, you may have heard a little bit about the Drift Crisis, but as a bit of a spool up, if this is the panel you're catching or you're rewatching us on YouTube, shout out to our YouTube peeps. The Drift Crisis is our new big hardcover release event for this year for the Starfinder program. It really is an event that is happening in the entirety of the Starfinder setting, and is something that is a bit of an experiment for Paizo in a lot of ways. We're doing a hardback that, rather than just being, oh, here's rules specific to this sort of, like content, like an armory or a character operations manual or narrative that's focused around a part of the space. This is about an event, a situation where the drift, our hyperspace equivalent, has a breakdown, and what that means for the entirety of the galaxy. And so we have adventures. Paizo writes a lot of adventures, if you hadn't noticed, and so we have a lot of different options on where to adventure. And so before we jump into going into all the nitty gritty great details of all these adventures that we have coming up, which are amazing, I'm not lying here, I'm not even sugarcoating this, I'm excited to run several of them. I wanted to talk really quick with our panelists, kind of give everyone an opportunity to say what excites them about adventuring in the Drift Crisis, be it from our products that are coming out, but also like what they're excited about personally for the Drift Crisis and their own adventures that they might have in it. And I'm going to start at the opposite end of the spectrum this time and start with Jessica at the far end, and then make our way back to Keeley. We switch things up.
Give me time.
Jessica, tell me your thoughts. Tell me your thoughts on the Drift Crisis.
So I think one of the things I love about the Drift Crisis book itself most is just the huge amount of different plot hooks that are in it, and like mini campaign boards and stuff like that, springboards for further adventures. And I think the thing I'm most excited for is I'm a big sucker for the Drift itself and the spectra and stuff that's inside it. So I'm really excited to see what's happening in the Drift and run some interesting things with the spectra. I think that's what I'm most excited for.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so what you just did a panel on this. Can you keep up the energy? What is exciting about the Drift Crisis and adventuring? Go.
So many things. I mean, I'm also on board with the Spectra. I wrote a whole adventure seed about the Spectra and how they react to the Drift Crisis, and the things that go on in the Drift. But I'm also a huge fan of the adventure seed where you get stuck on on the Drift Titanic with Zoe. Like, I'd love to run and or play in that adventure. I also love the the refugee crisis on Absalom Station. I love the things that are going down Alluvion. I love, just the chaos. Oh, the rise of space pirates. Space piracy fixing the drift, causing the drift to happen. The drift crisis causes the space piracy to resurge, and the first Drift Crashers AP is, not gonna lie, my favorite Starfinder AP that I've read, and I've so far read almost all of them straight through.
Hey! Real quick shout out. Do we know who wrote that adventure? Huh?
Which one?
The first
Which
Drift
one?
Crashers.
The
That was
first
just that
one.
was just dropped. That was just
Yeah,
dropped.
that's.
Soul, come on. Do you know who wrote it? I was trying to buy you
I
time.
can.
It's okay.
I
You
can,
know Jason?
I can answer that question. I can
Yes.
answer that question for you, Thursday. That was Jessica Redekop, first time writing an AP volume for us. And I didn't develop it. That was our former colleague Jake Chandro, but he said that she knocked it out of the park. There's so much in. One thing that he said, I want to just repeat, that there is no there's no filler in that adventure. It's always, everything in it is there to move the story forward and to be something exciting and weird and interesting. So yeah, that particular AP, all the volumes of that particular AP go a little gonzo. The following AP, I'll just sort of talk about that. My stuff that's my favorite. Yeah, everyone said a lot of good
There we
stuff.
go. Good.
But I'll sort of, I guess, bleed into talking about the adventure specifically here. Those three Drift Crashers volumes are going to come out in the next 6 months or so. It's I think I've explained it before as a cross between Sliders and Quantum Leap and Lost in Space. So those three things kind of mashed up. The drift breaks and it sends you and your ship and maybe some other people just sort of all over the place. And here we are, of course, fighting some devils in hell in the first volume. You are first level characters who are in hell. So, take that, put that in your space pipe and space smoke it. It's going to, and that's just the first part of the first adventure, and it gets even more gonzo from there. You get to go to an alternate universe. You get to go to the future. You get to go to the realm of Cynoshore, that's Desna's realm. You get to go to a black hole. I'm giving away. I'm spoiling everything, by the way.
It's fine. Spoilers abound here, by the way.
Spoilers abound. And then there's a weird sort of 4-dimensional space object in the last adventure that you have to explore and whatnot. We follow that up with Drift Hackers, which is an adventure that is going to take place on Alluvion, and it's going to talk a lot about how the Trionites are taking the Drift Crisis and who's responsible for it in canon, right? And you get to solve the Drift Crisis that's our official solution. Obviously, if you do it on your own home game, you can solve the Drift Crisis however you want. But the Drift Hackers, you're going to get to basically do a little hacking of the Drift. There's a lot of computer stuff. There's a lot of cool, weird being on Alluvion, since Triune is a god of 3 parts, and one of those parts used to be Bry. There's some clockwork stuff in there, some fun clockwork material, and then you get to go basically in a cool, weird virtual Tron-like realm and solve the Drift Crisis from there. So I'm excited about all of that, obviously.
Wow.
Yeah. Take that.
I like, how do you follow that up? You're like Quantum Leap, Black Hole, like the fighting devils in Adventure 1. Well, I know how I follow that up, and I swear I totally can. Because I think, Soul, you did like a lot of reading through on the Drift Crashers adventure path, and have been, contributing quite a bit to that. What are your takeaways from that? Like, obviously, Mr. Keeley has just given us an impassioned plea of all of the high level stuff.
Sure.
What sort of stuff do you want, people? Why are you sorry? We are excited people. Look at this. I like clearly Navasi's evil here. Also, so is Eltronis. Like, look at the color of that blade. That's like dark evil. Soul, tell us.
Yeah, that's evil Solarian.
Yeah.
Isn't that concept cool? That is a really interesting part of, like you mentioned, in the alternate universe that you get shifted into in the first dimension is classic evil universe where there's mechanics worked in to flesh out evil. You run into evil counterparts of your PCs, and there's mechanics worked in to develop the evil counterparts in this world that's basically ruled by the Viscarium, and it's a real fascinating uh, like you said, the part of the reason I love this AP is it is, like you said, gonzo and everything's happening all at once, and it's exciting, and it really is hard. It's exciting, but also like you never lose track of it. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel overwhelming, is the thing, because there is a good solid through line of uh, a compelling villain chasing you down, and a compelling disaster that you need to stop, and they're related but they're not the same thing, and just it winds up putting together this interesting puzzle that I think is really going to challenge people, and it's a bunch of just fun, tropey, entertaining sci-fi stuff that I think people are going to just love getting to play with.
In
And
3
also
volumes.
Cynosure in 3 volumes. In 3 volumes, yeah, it covers 3 volumes. And the second one takes place mostly on Cynosure, and it's uh, a very interesting kind of. It's a very nice kind of cozy setting, almost a cozy. It I'm not entirely sure how to describe it. Aside from the fact that it's very much it's Desna's realm, and it feels very much like Desna. And I think if you're a fan of Desna as a concept, you'll really love what our writers have come up with for Cynosure, and what the adventure allows you to explore about that setting and about the interactions with Desna. Because that's the other thing, is that Desna winds up being the player character's kind of mentor and patron, and so you wind up with direct interactions with a literal goddess, and it's very, very touching in several places.
I believe that Paizo's own Jenny Jarzabski wrote that one, and I only know this because I remember hearing at some point from Jenny, Thirsty, I'm going to write an adventure where you can have brunch with Desna. This is a goal of mine. And so like stuff like that is just amazing to see. And again, I mentioned it before, but like three volumes. Like I really like some of the move to some of these 3 volume adventure paths for Paizo, just because you can kind of like have a complete story and also not be terrified that you're going to have to spend like 4 years playing it. Like 3 volume adventure path is something like people can much more reasonably like enter into their gaming sphere, so to speak. And I'm just like really excited for what Drift Crashers brings, because it's also kind of that AP that is like, where were you when this event started, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of the like pulls you into all the sliders, quantum leap, I like everything under the sun. But really, it's also at its core a story of you were at this like event when it happened, sort of like, where were you when JFK was shot? Well, actually, I was pulled into another dimension and was fighting evil versions of myself in hell. Like that's kind of the level that this adventure path brings, and so I really enjoy that aspect of Drift Crashers and what it brings to the setting, and really showcases that this is an event, and that Drift Crashers is sort of the first adventure path that's tying into this event. But we do have other products involved as well, and I think our next one might be Jessica. If you want to talk to us a little bit about organized play and how it's interfacing with the Drift Crisis.
Yeah, sure. So this weekend, live and digitally at PaizoCon, we're launching season 5 of the Starfinder Society, which is the Year of Redemption's Rise. The Starfinder Society is still recovering from a recent digital attack known as the Data Scourge, which was our focus for last year. And they're not really in a great place, but from this turmoil, we're coming together to bring about some positive change, both within the society and within the wider galactic community. And of course, this year is also the Drift Crisis. This is not the core focus of our year, but it is definitely happening, and you should feel that. So for starters, you're going to see a higher than usual number of scenarios taking place within the Pact worlds. These are places that you can reach without entering the Drift. You'll also see some of the changes and trouble that these places are facing as a backdrop to our scenarios. When we do travel further afield, you can expect to see some alternative methods of faster than light travel highlighted. And most importantly, we have 4 adventures focused on the Drift Crisis. That includes our special and 3 scenarios. So each of our scenarios are standalone adventures. Each tells a different kind of story about the Drift Crisis, and each is in a different level range. So to start us off right, we have Starfinder Society special, $4.99, A Time of Crisis.
Ooh.
This is a special for levels 1 to 6, written by the wonderful and talented Dennis Muldoon and developed by some guy named Thurston. So it is going to be a wonderful scenario. This scenario
also,
do we?
I believe we have some art, don't we? I believe we have some art for
we should.
season 5 of
Redemption's Rise.
Redemption's Rise. The one before that.
The other one.
We got this.
There we go.
Space.
Yeah.
Our special this year dives into what happens during the Drift crash itself on that very first day that the Drift failed, while traveling to a distant star system as part of an archaeological mission. A Starfinder Society fleet is ejected from the Drift, crash landing on an unknown world, and this scenario is about how they have to band together to survive. So this premieres this very weekend. So you can get out and play it live or digitally for PaizoCon. Otherwise, you can also play it at GenCon and other conventions throughout the year. Other than that, we've got 3 scenarios. We got 5-4. This is Fragment of the Fourth. This is a high-level scenario, which is what we're starting out with. It is for levels 9 to 12. It is written by Isis Wozniakowska, releasing next month. So this scenario highlights one of the things that the Starfinder Society is up to during the Drift Crisis, which you'll see in the Drift Crisis book. And that is essentially trawling. So the PCs begin aboard the Master of Stars, which is the flagship of the Wayfinders faction. And you are trawling packed space for signs of stranded people, for derelict starships, for dangerous planar matter, other things like that, other anomalies. So our mission picks up when the Master of Stars detects an immobile starship, which is familiar to the Starfinder Society. It is the Chronicler, which is a starship captained by a priest of Triune, an ally of the Society named Contemplator 16. So the PCs are dispatched to investigate, but their routine rescue mission will lead them far beyond the corridors of the Chronicler to an annexed drift beacon and into conflict with a group worshipping something known as the Fourth. We have art for this one as well that we glimpsed for a second.
We'll see it again. It's pretty cool.
Comes up. There we go.
Look at it.
So this is one of the Triunite people you will meet during this scenario, and I will leave it at that. They're pretty cool. I like them.
You just don't want to pronounce the name. We had a whole discussion on the name pronunciation before this panel.
I'm voting. You can call it canon. I'm calling them Nainimi. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. I said it, so now it's true. We have 2 others. So we have 5-7, Planar Bloom. This is a mid-level scenario. It's for levels 5 to 8. It is written by Joan Hong, and it's going to be available at the end of August. This scenario is a really fun, wacky one. So unstable planar matter has been ejected from the Drift during the Drift crash, and it has collided with Akaton's waste, causing regional destruction, but also rapid biological mutations in nearby life forms. But from this collision sprouts opportunity. The planar destruction has also terraformed the area into a lush, verdant jungle paradise in the middle of Akaton, which is attracting citizens, scientists, multiple gangs. This is a great resource. So the Starfinders are sent to investigate the planar bloom and the revitalized town beside it to figure out what can be done. Can this growth be stopped? It's still spreading. Should it be stopped? I don't know. The choice is yours. Hit me. I want to know. Play it and find out. And then our last one is number 514. So this is a low-level scenario. It's for levels 1 to 4. It is way near the end of year 5. Everything else I'm going to keep under wraps for now because it is a long way out.
Ooh. Very fancy, very fancy. I'm gonna pop in briefly on that because you mentioned
Yeah.
499 Time of Crisis, which some random
Yeah.
other Canadian named Thirsty did development on. And one
Yeah.
of the things that was really interesting about doing that interactive and what makes it a bit different, like one it is a second point in our Drift Crisis event that allows you to have that story for your character of where you were when the drift crash happened, where again that sort of pivotal moment. We wanted to provide you a few different options of where your characters could be, because that way, not everyone's experiencing it the same way. People are going to have different stories, different characters are going to have different stories. This really showcases that the Drift Crisis is an event and not just an adventure, right? Like there are so many things going on that different characters can have different places they were when certain things happened, or even different events that happened. And Time of Crisis was our way to kind of handle the Drift Crisis from the organized play Starfinder Society side of things. And one thing that was really important when I was developing this and working with Dennis on it and outlining it is, unlike a lot of our interactive specials, this one does not really build on a meta plot. It doesn't build on established characters. This is meant to be very much an interactive event that is about the event and setting up this event we have, but it doesn't require encyclopedic knowledge. So if you're someone out there who has ever been interested in organized play, or you're really interested, say, about the Drift Crisis event, then this is a great way for you to get involved. I'm going to, I don't know, throw all of our org play volunteer folks under the proverbial bus here and be like, I'm guessing there might be open slots for some of these tables. So if you haven't already, you should definitely check it out through our Discord and other mediums, just to see if you can get a place at a table and bring a first level Starfinder character and kind of live through this event and build your own stories and start your own sort of tale of going through the Drift Crisis. That's what something like this event is all about, is really about showcasing that this is an event. It's something that is going to be deeply impactful to a lot of different characters, and honestly to our player base, that there are going to be stories that are going to be told about this for years to come, and really shows us how this experiment works, and if people like this type of event, this kind of connected narrative that isn't necessarily just one adventure. Yeah, so that kind of hits on a lot of the org play stuff. I think where we have next, uh, as I continue talking, because now it is my turn to actually talk instead of just provide my
You.
usual commentary. That brings us to sort of the next wave of products that we have, which are our one shots, modules, and the like. And we've talked about a few of these. Previously mentioned, I think during Eric's keynote, Skitter Warp was announced, which is our free RPG Day product. Jason Keeley, who wrote that again? Who's that?
Oh, I think that was me. I did that. I wrote that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You want to maybe tell us a little bit about that, my friend?
Sure thing. Yeah, Skitter Warp is what happens when the our brave Skittermander iconics have to deal with a problem from the Drift Crisis itself. This actually kind of is a little bit of a sequel to Skitter Crash, where the Skittermanders crash on this planet that is home to some Osharus. But now so they're sort of returning. They're doing their normal salvage stuff when the Drift Crash hits, and these storms that sort of were happening on the on this particular planet get a whole lot worse, and kind of warp the planet a bit in a lot of ways, and kind of like mix in all of this sort of planar energy. So some Osharos end up kind of turning half angelic, and some of them turn half demonic. And what happens is one of the Skittermanders is still on the planet when it happens. So you've got to go down and rescue your friend, Nako, who's been sort of turned evil, and then you've got to figure out how to help her become good again. And in such that what we've done is we've taken the other three Skittermanders as pre-gens, and then we've also added in their boss, Nakanechkin, the Vesk, as a playable character now too. So you can, if you want to play one of these for RPG Day adventures that we've been putting out for a while, and you don't want to play a Skittermander, A, I don't know who you are, but B, you can also you can pick the Vesk boss in this one. So and he ends up getting helping out, being helpful as well.
in that best kind of helpful way, right?
And well, he's been around these he's been around these Skittermanders long enough that he knows how to be helpful. Nakonechkin, I was like, he's grumpy. He likes the Skittermanders, but he's just kind of real gruff about it.
Awesome. So for modules, a lot of the modules that were announced, we had so Defy the Dragon and Redshift Rally, which have been announced as modules. Those ones aren't particularly related to the Drift Crisis, but we did announce the case files, Drift Crisis case files, which that, spoiler alert, is related to the Drift Crisis. And again, I think Jason, you might have a bit more information on that one, and then we can kind of touch on those other two modules and how they might be able to factor into the Drift Crisis in some
if you
ways.
want, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's hear a little bit about the case files, like the high level thing. Yeah.
Drift Crisis case files is actually going to be kind of a it's sort of happens sort of later on in the Drift Crisis, and it's about solving some problems. Like you've got missing people and stuff that has happened, the fallout of the Drift Crisis as it's been progressing. And it you basically play private investigators for the Eyes Wide Agency, sort of a psychic detective agency that is on Absalom Station. So what we have done, and our own Jenny Drzewski is the one developing this, and what she did was sort of like gather a couple authors who are interested in the whole noir kind of thing. So it's meant to be kind of like this sort of we kind of like used the phrase psychic noir when we were discussing this to begin with. And this one actually is a little bit of an experiment as well, because it is 3 separate smaller adventures as opposed to one long adventure where you have a module that actually jump around a little bit in level. So the first one is, I think, around the first early levels, and then we kind of jump up a couple levels after that. So you can play them all the way through. You're just going to need to bump up your PCs in between, or you can use these to sort of intersperse into other Drift Crisis action, adventure seeds that are from the hardcover. So that was pretty cool. We've got as I think Jenny put it, a noir on the cover.
I was about to say, which noir are we talking about? Are we talking about the color, or are we talking about our Minotaur folks? Which
we're talking about both.
Okay, we do everything. Seriously, the Drift Crisis throws everything at the wall and sees what sticks and what flies off into the drift. All right, so that brings us to the other modules. I guess we'll maybe circle on over back to you really quick, Jessica. Were you involved with Redshift Rally? Was that a thing? Maybe
I did. It rings a bell. I wrote Redshift Rally, cover to cover.
Is it like a fever dream, or do you remember a lot about it?
I don't know. I read a lot.
Okay.
They'll run together at some point. Redshift Rally is an adventure where you are playing as you're joining a racing team to represent Redshift Revolution in the big racing event of the decade even. And it is, oh gosh, it's a lot of fun. It's got lots of racing. It has you get to spend a lot of time, in addition to racing, like socializing and getting to know all of your fellow racing teams and all these kinds of things, including one that you're probably not going to like right from the start. You're welcome. Yeah, I'm gonna go with. It's really fun.
Do you go into the drift? do you race in the drift?
You do not race in the drift. I'm sorry.
Okay, so what you're telling me is, if there was some kind of Drift Crisis, though, the drift might throw something into the way of one of like in the middle of your race. So if you wanted to set this during the Drift Crisis, like you could just be racing.
All kinds of crazy stuff mid-race. All kinds of things go in there. Whatever you want. Anything weird you found, toss it in there as an obstacle for them to drive around or fly around all over the place. I want to see it go crazy.
I just want to. Yeah. I just want to, like this, Jessica says you do a lot of racing, and you do pretty much every kind of racing that you could probably think of. You've got starship races. You've got basically ground vehicle races. You've got a water vehicle race in this. It does everything but a foot race, essentially, in this. So it's just sort of like lots of speed and lots of vehicles.
Well, and heck, for a slightly more subtle idea, if you don't want to like tie the drift crisis in as a dropping a brick in the middle of a race or something like that, one of the key like motivations for the whole Redshift Rally story is that the winner of this contest gets a big contract to design a spaceship, and if the drift crisis is something that's happening in the background, new spaceship designs, new engine designs are going to be all that more important in a world where the drift is no longer as stable or reliable as a form of transportation as it previously was. So this is all the more important in a post-drift crash world. So that's a subtle way to tie it in as well.
On that note,
Yeah.
there's a
Oh, good.
big cash prize for the winner, and if you're having trouble from the drift crisis, that sure solves a lot of problems.
See, and then this kind of brings me to the other module, which again isn't quite directly related to the drift crisis, but has mechs, and mechs are cool. And we have To Defy the Dragon that's also coming out, which involves our intrepid band of players going and retrieving mechs to fight a dragon with, which is developed by our own Jenny Jerzabski. And really, that seems like an adventure that you could toss a lot of fun drift crisis things into, even as much as just having your players get shunted out of the drift onto this planet, and that could be the place where you were sent
Yeah.
and have to do this thing, because that's where the drift crisis sent you during the drift crash. And so there's a lot of ways you can take these different modules and these different adventures. And one of the fun things about just the drift crisis book is that we go into a lot of detail about our adventure paths, our existing ones, and how you can essentially reskin, rework them to work during the drift crisis. And I believe that's several pages at the back of the book talk about just taking something like Dead Suns or Against the Aeon Throne and all those old adventure paths, and like how you can kind of just spin them to work in the drift crisis. So even if you're already running a campaign, there's still a lot of stuff that you can do to pull in this event into your games and amp up that concept of adventuring during the drift crisis. And then so that brings me to one more, which okay, we have one last art piece. It's gonna be wow, whoosh. I don't think we've talked about this one much, but here, let's take a look at this fancy last art piece we have. Look at this floating ship in the drift, beaten up, wounded. This is the cover art piece for the next Starfinder digital one-shot, Before the Storm. And this is like an accomplishment in a lot of ways, because as someone who's been working on the digital one-shots for the past few now, I keep getting feedback from when the line launched, and one of them, I will have people regularly come up to me and be, Thurston, when can I not play a pre-generated character in one of these one-shots? I really would like to not play a pre-generated character in one of these one-shots. Well, Before the Storm is the first digital one-shot we have that really encourages you to create your own characters. It does provide pre-generated characters in the forms of our typical icons. So you will have that Navasi, Raya, you'll have those in there for when you want to run it just for new friends who've maybe not played Starfinder. But this does talk this one shot, and for those of you who aren't familiar, our digital one shots are short, evening long adventures that are focused on here's the adventure, you can go through, you can play it in essentially a sitting. It comes with pre-generated characters, but it doesn't have any of like the org play additional rules. It's maybe not as overbearing as some like modules where they might have like subsystems or are much longer and meant to be accomplished in several seats of play. So these one shots are really just about getting new people in, showing them the game, and showing off the setting. Before the Storm is our Drift Crisis tie-in one shot, and what is to me really exciting about it, and one of the things that I had as a goal when I was outlining and developing it, was it ties in to the drift crash in several ways. One, it is the third option of where were you when this event happened. Canonically, though, it takes place just before the drift crash. So you can run it as this is the drift crash moment for your party, and this is what happened. But it's meant to actually directly lead into the Drift Crasher's adventure path. And you can run this one shot as essentially a prequel into Drift Crashers. And they work that way, both of them in tandem. This one is written by Jason Tondro, who has moved on in his career, but was the dev responsible for outlining and developing Drift Crashers. And so as a result of that, there's a lot of like tie-ins that we were able to work between the two. And what this adventure is, I'm seeing a lot of like Event Horizon. In essence, you're traveling, you and your party members are traveling on a shuttle through the drift, and this bow wave smashes into you, and there's another ship that was caught up in this bow wave. And your vessel can't send out any kind of communication. Your engines are out, and your only option is to go on board this other vessel to see if you can send out a distress signal or find out what has happened with this other vessel. And so there is that level of exploration, and that art piece we sort of had shown previously. That starship there is actually the starship you'll be exploring, and the map matches the artwork in a really fun and interesting way. Like if you look at it here, you can kind of see that there's sort of multi-levels in the aft of the ship, which is on the right-hand side here. So you have different like areas where you can access into the ship, and some of those areas are like heavily damaged, some of them aren't, and you're really going to be able to go into it. And it's meant to be, with these, like most of these one-shot lines, it's meant to be essentially a quick and dirty space dungeon exploration. But of course, with the Drift Crash, Drift Crisis, not everything is how it appears. So yeah, very excited for this one. This one is going to be, I think, very different type of adventure, but kind of scratch that old style gaming itch that a lot of people have. And yeah, I think that's yet another way that you can really bring the Drift Crisis into your games and be a starting point. What we're trying to provide with a lot of these tools and a lot of these adventures is ways for you as players and participants in our world to like branch off and do your own thing. So this Before the Storm ties into Drift Crashers, but if you just do Before the Storm and you're the GM who's like, I want to do my own Drift Crisis story, you can like take it and go in a different direction, and that all works with what we're doing, and that's sort of part of why this event exists. But I do want to maybe bring it back to some of my other panelist friends here, and I think what I know, big wide eyes here. As we're we're getting close to the end here. We're not quite there. We may have some questions, but what I'd like to go through, and this time I'm going to start in the middle. Then I'm going to go to Keely. Then I'm going to go to Jessica, just because I like keeping it strange and awkward in how I deliver these. Starting with you, so like, what adventure-wise do you like really excites you about the Drift Crisis event, as far as what options there are for adventures now, and where you kind of see this event going? Like, what excites you about what's going to come out of this event like a year from
Really big thing is
now?
I'm really excited to see. The big thing is I'm really excited to see what everybody comes up with more than anything else. Like I'm excited to see, excited to hear what people, what stories people wind up telling on the internet, on the through social media. What I'm excited to hear, everybody's stories on Reddit, on Discord, on Twitter, just the accounts of this is what we did during the Drift Crisis. This is what my DM came up with. I think it's just a real big shifts like this are always a big opportunity for people to be creative, and I'm excited to see where people take that.
Awesome. And Jason, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, what's all said is great. I also definitely want to hear what their solution, like how many people actually end up solving the Drift Crisis in their own campaigns, or if they just use it as an event and then sort of take on in a year or so, if they're still playing the same campaign, using the what happens to the Drift canonically, which we will present in the future for the Starfinder setting, and absorbing that into their own campaign. I won't say exactly how the Drift is going to change once this is all over, but I will tell you that it is going to be a bit different, a touch different.
Just a touch, though. Not a lot.
Just a
Not
touch different.
just a touch.
We're not completely blowing up our setting and then starting from scratch, right? We are just kind of like scrambling things up a little bit and then putting some of the pieces back together. But when when you drop something and have to glue all the pieces back together, they don't always fit at the same time, and you end up with maybe a tiny little piece missing because it fell under the couch, or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can't wait for the adventure where we go under the couch to find the missing drift piece. What about you, Jessica? What are you excited about for what's coming up for the Drift Crisis and where it's going?
So I gotta agree with Sol. I'm really excited to see all the stories that everybody tells. The Drift Crisis can be, because it's such a wide event, and it goes for the year, it can be one of those events that can bring our community together in other ways, with like the stories we tell and how we handle different things and how it worked in your campaign. So I'm excited for that. I'm also really excited to see in our Starfinder Society scenarios, we always have reporting conditions so you can track what you did during the scenario. I'm really excited to see what happens in our scenarios for the Drift Crisis. All of them have things where you can tell me what happens, and I want to see how we can use that to shape our future scenarios for next year. As well as looking forward to the future, post-Drift Crisis, what kind of new changes can we highlight in our adventures, and what kind of new stories we can tell going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the future is looking so cool for the Drift Crisis and what it can. I'll tell you, I maybe dabble in running games occasionally, sometimes streaming them, and I'm looking at the Drift Crisis like, okay, so I could definitely do a whole campaign that wouldn't touch on like any of the print products we have. Like, I don't have to do adventures. I could do something entirely different, and because there's this event, you can still have it feel like part of what's going on in the setting at the time. And like, you can do such outlandish things, and that just has me so excited. Like, I was sitting around thinking like, okay, well, where could I have like the Drift Crisis adventure of that Thirsty's going to tell start? I'm like, well, okay, so we could have it start in an elevator, and then like, I don't know, a chunk of planar debris flies out of the drift and crashes into a planet, and we go all post-apocalyptic disaster movie, right? Like, that's one. The other one is I'm on the bar of a starship going through the drift, and the drift crash happens, and suddenly I'm like, just the bar of the ship has ended up in heaven, and I've got angels coming asking like, what's the alcohol limit on that, sir? And I'm like, what's going on? And then, there's just all of these different ideas that you can use to start a game that I think is so compelling and powerful. And I'm sure that there are people out there who maybe have some questions for us about adventures in the Drift Crisis, maybe things you might want a bit of information on. So as we've got a few minutes left here, I'm going to give the warning to people in the chat maybe to post a question or two that we could answer in our final minutes here. Yes, Jason?
While people are typing up questions, the second thing you said was one of the sort of ideas that I was floating for the Drift, adventures in the Drift Crisis that didn't get picked up, which is just something called Stranded in Heaven, where you get to heaven and they're like, okay, well, you're not supposed to be here, but we can't really technically let you leave because you might be demons or devils, and we don't know how you got here. So it becomes about sort of navigating the bureaucracy of heaven just to get out of it, because you're not dead, you just ended up in heaven because of some planar nonsense. Which I think that would be, if anyone else out there wants to take that idea and run with it for their home campaign, I think that would be hilarious.
Ooh, I've got a good question here. Will the crisis cause issue for the powers of some classes? That's a very interesting question. I mean, certainly the Drift Crisis book has some like options and such that might touch on a lot of our classes. So you look like you want to jump through. Do you have an answer for this?
I was gonna say it does cause. I wouldn't say it causes an issue exactly, but there is some choices for some of the classes. Like the thing that pops to mind is there's a new. I forget what the term is, but for the precogs, there's a new anchor. Basically, a new the Drift Crisis can be a new point in time that the precog can latch onto as I can't remember what their proper term is, but as the core whatever part of their class. And there's a couple of other options for some of them. Yeah, so there's a couple of other options as well for some of the more mystical classes, specifically the Mystic, I think, and I think yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head which other ones, but they don't disrupt the classes, but there are new options, and they are quite fun. And there's lots of gear options for everybody.
Yes, need more gear. All that sweet equipment. Um, see, I really like that too, and there's so many ways. Like, obviously the Drift Crisis anchor for the precog is powerful, but then you could easily do something like for the Witch Warper. You could do it for other classes too. And so maybe you're one of those people who likes writing and wants to do some Starfinder Infinite stuff. Hey, this event is kind of open to all of you as well, which is another vector you can really contribute and help grow the setting in a sense. And like, we can't possibly do everything with this. We're trying though. We're trying. We're doing as much as we can. But it'd be really interesting to see it. Yeah, in a year from now, what sort of other options are out there. I have one that might be good for you, Mr. Keeley. How do I get to drift into Horizons of the Vast?
That's right. Yeah. So when we were doing this book, we only put in stuff for up to Fly Free or Die adventure pathwise in the section you were talking about how to tie the Drift Crisis into to published adventures, because most of Horizons of the Vast hadn't been published or at this point, or we were working on it at the same time. So Horizons of the Vast, obviously, you're out there in the vast. You're on a planet. You're on a planet. You're on your own. I think the Drift Crisis could really impact how just the sort of general tone of you're out there on your own, right? As it stands, it takes like we say it just takes every once in a while your patron shows up and lets you buy and sell things and so that we can keep the the economy going and people get their gear. But if during a drift crisis, maybe you're just stranded, you're abandoned there on New Horizons. What is it called again? New Harmony. And you're just going to have to fend for yourself. So it becomes more of a survival game, and it gets to a point where you have to, learn to craft your own materials and learn to craft your own weapons and armor and all that stuff you need to go on the adventure. So if you wanted to use that drift crisis, I would, take place maybe halfway through that first adventure, just sort of like everyone gets the news that the drift done broke, and you're not going to see help. You're on your own for who knows how long. And then at some point, maybe it gets when after the drift crash happens, drift crisis is ongoing, and the drift isn't completely unusable at that point, and so it just becomes longer, for you to get help in those later volumes when you're out there, sort of, looking to build a coalition with other systems like the Pack Worlds or the Vescarium. That just takes longer,
Absolutely. I think that's I see one about Biohacker and Envoy. I think the book is out. You'll have to check it out. I don't think we got all the classes in Drift Crisis, like for specific class options. But don't worry. We are always doing more class options, and there's always fun back matter and future books. You maybe saw, I think, Interstellar Species got a bit of a shout out, and that's going to have some cool new options, at least for some of our species. And we're always working on stuff. It's so hard. I don't know what I can talk about and what I can't talk about sometimes. I'm like, obviously we are working on rules, and we love all of our classes equally, but I love the precog the most because I wrote it. So but we love them all equally. So, and seeing like space survival sounds really fun. I think that's going to be one of the stories you're going to hear a lot about with the drift crisis from these first few days, is people who are going to go through that drift crash event. They're going to have their stories. Again, a lot of the products we've talked about today really hit on the where were you when the drift crisis happened, when the drift crash occurred. And from there, we're going to start seeing those games spread out as like Drift Crashers goes further in. We have the case files releasing. We're really going to be seeing how they evolve from the day the drift crashed to living through the crisis. And I think you'll be seeing a lot more content on that. And I'm really excited just to hear from everyone here in chat and in our communities what their experience with this event looks like, because again, it's something so radically new that we haven't done in a book yet. We're still sussing it out and trying to figure out how this is all going to come together, but I think almost like everyone is just so excited to see where it's going and what you, our players and fans, are going to do with it. So Sus. Okay. Good. We're going to end on an Among Us reference. Very good. We did it, everybody.
Always.
Unless I think we're coming up just at the end of our time. Unless there's anyone else has anything to add before we say our goodbyes. Going once.
Don't forget that we have the Discord channel afterwards. We'll
Yes.
at least a few of us will be on there. If you have any other questions we didn't get to, or just want to chat with us, come there.
Yep. And before we go, I will once again start on the far right, going left towards myself. Starting with Jessica, if you want to give any shout outs before we go and say your goodbyes.
Sorry, I drew a
Shrug.
total blank. I do have shout outs. Thanks for everybody for coming out to PaizoCon. Thank you for all of our volunteers, all of our players, all of our organizers. Oh my gosh, so many people come together, especially on the organized play side and within the Paizo team to make any one of these cons go off. So thank you for everybody for putting in all the work that you do.
Yeah, Sol.
Honestly, yeah, just ditto everything just said. Thank you all. I hope everyone's having fun. It's great to see you. I hope this is going to be a great weekend.
So, Jason.
Hey, yes. Again, yeah. As always, thanks to everyone, and stay safe out there, everybody.
Stay safe, indeed. Everyone, thank you for coming by to this panel. We all love you very much and appreciate your time and being a part of PaizoCon, being a part of Starfinder, and hopefully being a part of the Drift Crisis event that, as you can hopefully tell, we are all super passionate about. And we look forward to hearing your stories and hearing what exact tales and trials and tribulations you have in the Drift Crisis in the coming days, weeks, and months. It's really exciting time for us here at Paizo. Again, thank you all. You can catch all of us on our social medias, which are underneath the bar. If you're one of the YouTube people, you can go back and find those. Otherwise, thank you all for watching. We're gonna duck out now, and I believe next up we maybe have something dark archive related. So stay tuned for that. Thanks all. We'll see you on the other side of the Drift Crisis. Goodbye.
Bye bye.